So, call to order Berlin Finance Committee meeting. Open session public meetings are subject to being recorded. Your image and voice will be recorded. All right, let's get to the easiest part, the minutes. Anybody, just so, last time we had very bad, it's like we went through about 8 meetings before we approved.
We tried to do it at the end of the meeting and nobody was...
Yes, everybody wanted to leave.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll second that motion.
Any other discussion on it? All right, roll call, Scott, aye.
Mary, aye.
Cliff, aye.
All right, passes 4-0. Okay, so we will get, assuming we haven't heard anything for veterans.
No, but I have their budget, and I can explain it.
Sure.
So you get me, if that's
Yes,
okay.
you are-
All me, nothing but me this evening, so I apologize in advance. Let me go to the veterans budget.
I didn't see much changes on it, so it was,
No, really nothing significant. I will bring it up on the screen.
It's kind of
here.
petite anyway, isn't it?
It is
Yes.
small. So what it has is the 2% cost of living increase in the salary line item, which is a whole $187. On the expense side, they're asking for an additional $35 for dues, and what did I do? Nope, there we go. And Chapter 115 benefits are staying level funded at $11,000. So this would be a total budget of $20,926, an increase of $222 over FY24.
For someone who's not schooled in this, what is chapter, what?
Chapter 115 are the
115.
state benefits that veterans can apply for and receive. They do have to do with income and assets to some extent. There is a bit of paperwork, but if there are veterans out there that are looking to receive state benefits, our veterans officer is in on Wednesdays, 10 to 12, and can assist.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions on this one?
nope.
I'm gonna fly through these tonight for you.
This is Brian Stearns, is that his name?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
and Jim.
Cabral.
Thank you. I just know him as Jim. It's always Jim. Who has a wonderful Newfoundland, by the way. But he is also in helping out with this as well. He is retired, but helps out from time to time as well. All right. So this one's a little more complicated to explain, and it looks strange, but I will explain to you why momentarily.
This is select board?
This is select board.
Okay.
June and I had a lot of conversations about how challenging it is to separate expenses between select board and town administrator when we're in the same budget with the same staffing essentially outside of the elected officials' salaries. So after much discussion, we decided to combine the salaries and expenses from the select board budget into the town administrator's budget because we're literally going, well, which one has money? Because it's all one office essentially. So it makes more sense to bring them together and track everything for transparency out of one fund and be able to break that out a bit. So basically the elected officials' salaries get the 2% cost of living increase, which is an additional $78. Don't spend it all in one place. And then we took all of the expenses and the salary line item for the administrative assistant to the town administrator out. So that actually leaves this budget with just a $3,939 balance. So that would be the stipends for the 3 board members. All right, so I will go and will make hopefully more sense when I pull up the town administrator's budget. So we were really trying to go through, and Dee and I were trying to more accurately account for expenditures and where they're coming from out of different categories. So the administrative assistant to the town administrator was changed to a salaried position because of the night meetings, extra things that require late nights from time to time. For example, Dee just left at about 7 o'clock this evening, trying to get things wrapped up. So those are combined, whereas last year it was just my salary. So now it's my salary and her salary. Looks like a gigantic increase, but it's not. It is my contractual increase, which goes from 144 to 148, and it is Dee's 2% cost of living increase. Any questions on the
So what was
payroll
so
side?
what's Dee's salary then?
This is why I bring my calculator, because I can always do it on my phone, but sometimes I
Just
like
a
to go old school.
smidge under 72.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, 71,681. All right, any other questions on the salary? All right. And then we have our expenses. So we actually added a column to the left for what came out of the select board budget and was added into the town administrator's budget to make it a little less confusing. So advertising was previously in select board now, and we do advertising for various things, procurement as well as hearings for the select board. So it makes more sense to have it in this budget where we can use it for both. That's staying level funded at $400. Trash, unfortunately, believe it or not, has gone up. Our previous provider for those services is no longer available, so we had to go out and get quotes, and that has gone up. I'm sorry, I went into public facilities in my mind. Sorry about that. This is the shredding in the hallway, which we've increased significantly in a good way. We've been actually having departments go through and start purging through the legally required process of getting rid of documents and scanning things and trying to go more electronic. So it costs $85 each time we empty those bins. Well worth it, and we looked at basically what we had spent in the town administrator's budget and figured that we didn't really need to add in the $320 on the select board side, so we reallocated that, as you'll see here. Postage came from the select board side, and we increased it slightly as postage is going up. Copy jobs, that is the printing of the annual town meeting warrants. So basically we took a little bit of an increase there because the cost of printing paper, ink, along with everything else has gone up. So Clinton Offset does the printing for those jobs. But what we were able to do was look at the fact that perhaps we could cut back in some places. So we ended up coming out at $4,000. So we had the 450, hold on, I'm sorry. My eyes just skipped a line. So we had $3,500 from the select board budget and $550 from the town administrator's budget. So we made it rounded out to $4,550 because we added an additional $500. Sorry, when it's laid out this way, it gets a little confusing because of what we saw as the potential increased cost of, everything going up for our copy jobs. Consulting, we level funded.
I'm confused here. So isn't the last column the increase?
So the last column is the increase, but the problem is it looks different because we're bringing in money from the select board budget and adding it to the town administrator's amount. So the first column where you see
Right.
3,500 is select board. The second is town administrator.
Yeah.
So there's actually only a $500 increase, not a $4,000
Oh, you're doing
increase.
4,000 based on your last year's budget as opposed to
Correct.
combined.
Yeah, so
Okay.
the form doesn't totally accommodate the consolidation of budgets, so we talked a while about how the best way to do it was, and this is kind of what we settled upon, to show the difference between FY24 and FY25 in that last column, but to add in this additional column for select board so you can see that the difference really isn't taking into account the money that we pulled in from the select board budget. Does that make more sense?
Okay.
Sure, so that column on the left is what would have been designated to a select board budget, but we're eliminating, are we going with the number that is the town administrator's, the budget number?
So,
Code, or what are we doing? Are we gonna eliminate a line out of the Excel chart when we get all done? Is that what's happening here?
So, yes, so what we did was, and unfortunately, because when we show the budget, we always show the previous year.
Yeah.
So I can't just get rid of expenses, I have to show that I've taken it out
Sure.
of select board and moved it to town administrator, so it's going to look like it's a $4,000 increase, but it's able to be explained because you look above and you
You'll
can
see
see that there's a $4,000
decrease.
decrease
Yeah.
coming out of select, or $3,500, excuse me, in this
Right,
case. So really, it's only a net of $500.
And now I'm backing up way too much, but you said that the
That's
trash
fine.
thing, which is the shredding.
Yep.
So it really, because initially you indicated people are doing more of it, it's increased cost, but really you're not. You've actually decreased because you had 320 into one budget, and it was 955. You leveled it, so it looks like the 320 is being absorbed in here.
Hold on. Because we did out the, let's see. Oh, here we go. This is what I was looking at, but of course it keeps it all together. What I did was I tried to pull certain line items when Dee and I were talking, and I think I got a little confused between public facilities trash, which had gone up substantially, so I'm sorry.
Okay.
I just completely confused myself on that one. I apologize. So contracted services for the shredding is at $955. That is what it was in FY24. So when I go up, we must have upped it in FY24 because of the additional amounts that we were receiving. So it's like $85 every time we have them come, and they've been coming approximately once every month to month and a half. So I misspoke on that one, I apologize.
So you're basically getting a savings of 320.
Which is being
the select board
reallocated into a
was-
different line item.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then consulting level funded, that is the funding that is mostly used for our LSP, Weston and Sampson, to oversee contractual legal obligations under the Maplewood agreement that we have.
LSP.
Licensed site
Licensed site
professional. So they oversee the loads of soil importation and look over the documents that are provided by the licensed site professional on Maplewood's
So-
team and look at those docs. And we looked at last year about a cost analysis on whether or not that made sense for us to do. And it really it's actually within the legal agreement that the town has the right to do so, and it allows the town to oversee those documents and have some oversight, which we wouldn't otherwise have. So while it is a solid chunk of change, we talked with the select board about it, and the vote was to continue to move forward with those services.
So, Chris and I remember that question being frequency, not do you do it, but frequency.
Yep.
That's, I think, what we had discussed, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually stopped because there is a cleanup that's going on the site under a DEP order right now. So while that's going on, they can't do any more soil importation. So the
Okay.
one thing I can tell you is it's been at least 6 months since I've seen a soil package. So there has been some significant savings in FY24 there.
So is the DEP doing the cleanup, or they ordered?
DEP's ordered So it happened in July with the rain, like everywhere else. They had some washout that caused some issues that they're working to address, I believe, on some neighboring parcels,
Yeah.
without getting into too much detail.
So I can take a tiny detour. I've gotten to know an LSP, Cliff, so I can tell you my explanation for the non-LSP user is that, you know that old rhyme about the Cabot family in Boston? For this is good old Boston, the land of the bean and the cod.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
Yeah. Where the
Uh-huh.
Lowells only talk to the Cabots and the Cabots only talk to
the
God.
cod.
To God, right? So only the here in this case, only the LSP talks to the DEP. Right. That's how
Yes.
we do it. How am I doing, Peg?
Really well, Mary.
And we just need our own little ditty for this.
I like that.
So
That's
you-
very
you-
true. So
we can't, ordinary mortals are not allowed to talk to the DEP, so.
unless you're
that.
me, but we won't talk about that. I have a secret way. But no, it's it is something we're having a measure of oversight because of the concern that the community has had over the years regarding soil importation in general. And, you know, concern about like-kind soils and where those are coming from, especially into a farming community where you just worry about something coming from a larger site that may not be comparable, making sure that there's somebody overlooking the testing. And I can tell you, I did, actually, if you give me a second, Mary, if you guys are interested, I did an analysis. Oh, it's not gonna let me open it. I'll email that to you. I did an analysis. I talked to Weston and Sampson about how many packages they had to kick back for issues that they found. And it was over 50%. I can't remember the exact number, but they had issues with, and a lot of them were issues with charts or graphs or things of that nature, but they had to go back and actually correct those based on a secondary review by our LSP. So it seemed worth it based on the number of things that were being caught.
The
And I can get
details
that
are,
for you.
the details are pretty extraordinary, what you have to, hoops you have to jump through.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for the explanation.
Yep, absolutely. So office supplies is level funded with $2,200 from select board, $750 from town admin. That increase of $2,200 is just what came in from the select board budget, if that's an easier way to explain it. I'm getting better as we go. Travel, we did actually level fund. We looked at our cost for the last year, and that was sufficient to keep it at the 510. So we didn't need the 100 that was there on the select board side. Dues actually have remained level. So we were able to take the select board dues and the town administrator dues amount and combine them into $850. So that $550 increase is just what came from the select board budget. And then we level funded meetings at $500. And then what we did was the other expenses is where we put some of these extra costs in, because there are random things that come up from time to time, whether it becomes a, you know, we handle so many different things in this office that come out of this, and the Vadar licenses are one of them. So every person who wants to look at Vadar, which is our accounting software and treasurer software, has to have a license. So in order to be able to look at our accounts and look at our payables, you actually have to have a license. And we were able to pick one up because there was a decrease in staffing numbers in the treasurer collector's office, but that came at a cost of $445 per license, which is why we have the increase of $450 that you see there. So that brings our total to $33,715. And actually, the easier way for me might be able to pull it up this way when I wrote it into the budget. So if you look at the budget that I've started with, the first column has our FY24 town meeting approved budget. The second column has all of the requests that were submitted by the departments. So if you look under select board, you can see where everything was removed except for the stipends. And if you look under town administrator, you can see where everything was added. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep hitting the wrong button here. And we did not have the full-time salary in there before. Why did the expenses do that to me? We had expenses in there before. Sorry. That's not right. This is still a work in progress. And then the expenses, hold on, what did we have for expenses in the previous year? So we had previously in the select board total, we had $29,008 in expenses, and we had $3,965 in expenses. So you can see that that is essentially very close to a break even there once we added everything up on the expense side. I think it'll be easier too than trying to manage two different accounts and two different budgets, because there is so much crossover between everything that's going on. So that's the plan there. You guys have any questions on that?
Makes sense to me. But then again, I'm new.
That's okay.
So I was assuming we'd only have one budget line, a number, but we still have two. We still have one just for the stipend. So that
Right.
code is still open.
Correct, because
And then it
what
all
happened
rolls
was
up.
when you transitioned to town administrator, there was a town administrator budget
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
created, but then,
Yeah.
you know, the more time I spend here, I go, there's just too much crossover between the two. And I'm used to actually seeing them combined into one department.
We'll see who was paying attention at town meeting when whoever gets up and asks that question. Draw straws, who has to explain it.
I can explain it if need be.
There will be people who will.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
It looks like the town administrator's
Yeah.
budget is going up substantially.
Yeah, we've had
What does
things
she think she
moving
is?
around from cemetery to highway and certain other things
Mm-hmm.
and that, yeah, we've had to be prepared for, because if not, it's like, how do I speak
I'm just
coherently to this?
Giving myself an extra 30 grand in the,
Yeah,
no. I didn't want to make any changes last year coming in, not having had any time to really settle in or look at things. But I'm also trying to create efficiencies. And why manage two budgets when you can do it all in one? Because you're reconciling monthly then two budgets instead of one. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense. All right, the next one is our favorite budget, the legal budget.
Oh, boy.
I was just going to ask.
Yeah, let's
Well, of
find-
course you would ask. The attorney
Well,
wants to know.
No. It's because we're in line items in the 100 category, general government, and I thought, well, it has to be there somewhere.
That is the one.
It's the one.
So we were budgeted at $75,000 for FY '24. And I can tell you as of the end of November, we were at 49,000 expended. Now, some of that is the Highland Ridge lawsuit that will be coming here for a reserve fund transfer, and we've been separating out all those invoices into their own little
Yep.
folder so we can come forth with that. But I'm already at basically 2/3 of the budget expended for less than half the year. So based on that, if you take the Highland Ridge out and you add in the month of December, you're looking at about $50,000 spent for the first half of FY '24, which is why I'm recommending going up to $100,000. I really don't like spending money on legal costs, but I have to tell you, things get more complicated, laws are more complicated, personnel issues. I just feel like we have to protect the town, and that does come at a cost. and I try to use them as sparingly as possible. I have my contract templates and things that I use that have already been pre-approved that I can recycle, so I don't have to run them through legal counsel every single time. And I certainly try to keep my questions to a minimum, except when we really need them. I have to say, honestly, this is not coming from regular town council. These costs are coming from HR town council for the most part. And it's some challenging situations we're trying to work through. But I think it's important and necessary that we address issues that could put us at risk and cause us further larger issues down the road.
So you mentioned coming from HR town council, but is it, I know we were transitioning to a new attorneys. Is that transition happen, or some of them is still legacy, or?
So we have two separate, and a lot of towns have this, you have a regular town council and an HR town council. We kept the HR town council and we changed regular town council from KP Law to Petrini and Associates. Smaller, more boutique firm. They work with 5 towns directly and contract work out with about 15 other communities. They also just won a major lawsuit with the town of Holden against the city of Worcester, which you may have heard of, over water issues, for about $27 million. It was a pretty big landmark lawsuit. So I actually happened to work with them in Leicester. They had reached out with some interest. We had some conversations, and given the fact that they work with smaller towns, it seemed like a good fit. And I have to say, I think they've been great so far. One of the areas we were having some challenges in were on the land use side. And while I don't want to speak for conservation, I think that they've guided us through some really tough issues with Highland Ridge and other matters. And the knowledge that we have on the land use side, I think, is a bit stronger even than we had before. So that's been really helpful. Their bills come in about $1,800 a month. The highest bill I've seen from them was $2,100. So it's really on the HR side that we're seeing those $7,000 or $8,000 bills.
And that's still KP?
Nope, that's Valerio.
Oh, Valerio.
Dominello and Associates.
Yep.
And they're fantastic, I have to say, on the HR side. So I wouldn't change them at all. They are the kinds of attorneys that will literally give you solid common sense advice and not just put something in an email that's a citation from Mass General Law, which I've had attorneys do that before, and that's just not helpful. They will actually say, tell me what the situation is and here's how we think you should handle it. So they've been great. So that's my recommendation on legal, unfortunately. All right, and then, so that's depressing. We'll go to something less depressing. Data systems, actually, we were able to level fund, which is really exciting. That doesn't happen every day. Let me download the summary sheet so you can actually see the breakdown. Okay, so, oh, come on, don't go upside down. There we go. All right. So these are basically all of our expenses under data systems, otherwise known as IT. We have looked at all of our costs as they came in for '24 and what our contractual obligations will be for '25. And we have some increases in some areas, but we actually have some decreases in other areas. We did make a major copier lease switch, which has saved us a significant amount of money. We entered into a new contract with we entered into a new contract with Xerox, formerly known as Conway, and they do our copier and printer lease, and we were able to get a much better rate on the copiers themselves by going with the parent company. They sold the smaller company, believe it or not, into the larger company, which you would think sometimes that would work in your disadvantage, but it did work in our advantage this time. We have a nominal, about a 7% increase in our IT managed services. That is a fixed fee. We have an increase of about the same in our EDR, which is endpoint detection monitoring, endpoint detection reporting. It is a required security monitoring that our insurance company says we have to have in order to have cybersecurity insurance.
Okay.
It's endpoint detection, so that's part of why if you've had to log into anything town-related, you have a two-factor authentication now on everything, and basically it just keeps bad people out of our stuff, is how it's been explained to me. And it apparently does that well enough that the insurance company saves them a lot of money by making us buy it. So that's that. Our spectrum for the town broadband actually was budgeted higher than it actually is when we looked at the cost for the year, is about $200 a month. So we tried to more accurately reflect that in the line item there. Gmail is $1,800 a month. That's where obviously we get our email and our productivity suite from, which is the Drive and everything else that we get from Google. And what we are trying to actually put a little bit of money into our computers, because we are coming up on a year where we have a number of older computers that need to be replaced. So where I was able to save some money in some areas, I tried to go ahead and put those mostly into the computer leases and what they call the uncovered services or equipment, which would be the, oh no, this broke during the year. Whether it be my printer, I need a cable for XYZ, whatever IT needs people need for the office, I tried to reallocate. But the good news is, by being able to identify cost savings in a couple of those areas, we were able to increase some of the spots where we really should be putting some of our funding.
So one comment, Kristen, I'm looking at
Yeah.
the Zoom licenses.
Yeah.
It says 100% change, is that right?
No, that is not.
Yeah, okay, just,
Why
I
did
wasn't
that do
cross-eyed.
that? Thank you.
I was looking at those changes.
$53. Why did it say 100% change?
Well,
Yep, that's messed up.
maybe
I will fix that.
that was supposed to be like 10 or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or 1, something. I'm really interested in the spectrum drop. Do you have any color on that?
It's not a drop, it's just that basically, so when I came in, I had not much of a frame of reference and not much time to reallocate funds in my first budget year. So
okay.
I went
Okay.
with what the
Understood.
previous year was.
Sorry.
And then
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
with a year's worth of data, we looked at it and said, no, that's actually
okay.
really where things are at.
Yeah, because it was sort of knocking me off my chair. It's
Yeah,
like, I can't
Spectrum doesn't go
believe-
down.
Yeah, that was my thought. Yeah.
No, there was just too much budgeted in the line item.
So, and I recognize Conway mostly as a copier service, copier office equipment service outfit.
Yeah.
That when I was running a budget, we had them for a period of time. So I think, it looks like Xerox must have bought their.
They did.
service
I forgot
provider.
to change the name to Xerox, but we used to use Conway to service, and we had a copier lease through Wells Fargo. So
I see.
now Xerox actually, because we did it through the parent company, was able to offer us a better rate on the machines. So that was a pretty significant amount of savings. Plus, we put more printers in the building on the account, which saved us some money on ink, because they'll automatically do ink and service for all of those machines. Plus, we found that our copy counts were like really high and oddly high in some places. So kudos to Amy over in accounting, because she fought for the first couple of months with them, because the old system transferring over to the new, there were some accounts on there that looked a little wacky, and she went through and fought with them to get the correct copy counts on there.
Oh, good.
And that actually did generate a cost savings for us as well.
So I'm curious, is Xerox selling or leasing their equipment with this
So we're
arrangement?
leasing Xerox's
Leasing it, yeah,
two copy machines. So we have a 3-year lease. And that would be the one out here in the hallway, and then there's one down in PD.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and the other way we saved was, there was one in this room that really wasn't being used. And they said they didn't want it back. It was just a little machine. They basically said it was obsolete. And she goes, yeah, she goes, I think that, you know, we can give it to you for like $35. And I went, yes, please. And so we ended up giving it to Eloise because she needed something better in her office to do everything that she does.
Excellent.
So $35, we got a workhorse. That machine initially was valued at almost $3,000. So it was a good deal. And part of that is that transition of companies too. There's just certain things they
Sure, it's a
will
good
service
time.
and they won't service, and
Yeah.
they say, nope, we're not gonna do that one, but you can have it for cheap. Okay. So that's data systems. Town report is the next one. And we have a new strategy for the town report. Let's see. Where is town report? No. I don't have all the numbers memorized of all the departments, so you have to bear with me a second.
It has its own number, town report does.
Yeah. So we have boxes of town reports that were not picked up last year, like 2 giant boxes. So we are going to reduce the number of reports. And we actually reduced the number of reports last year, and we're able to do it for just under $2,000. So in an abundance of caution, because we know costs go up, we estimated $2,500, but that still allowed us to reduce that budget by a little over $1,000. I just don't think we need to get as many as we used to. People aren't picking them up and taking them as much, and I think if we advertise it on the website where we put it through Facebook and, you know, social media, then hopefully folks can access it there as well. I'd like to eventually do that with a warrant too. We'll see, we'd have to change the bylaw for that. The bylaw requires us to mail the warrant to everybody, every household in town. So, yep. So that is the town report. Next one is.
Do you know if other towns are still mailing things, like towns that have town meeting are mailing their warrants?
I have never heard of it before. Now, I don't know every town, and I can't speak to like the smaller towns out in Western Mass, but I've worked in a number of communities in Central Mass, and I can almost guarantee you they're not doing it in Metro West or Boston area. So it is a huge cost, and I understand that you want it to be available, but you can also make hard copies readily available at like the town hall, the library, different places in town like 19 Carter. You know, there's a number of different ways that you can do it. You also can, you know, there's organizations that if you have folks that are shut in, could perhaps bring them to, you know, bring a stack over to Northbrook Villages or other places in town. So I think we could definitely get them out and broadly disseminated. And then the website, having it up there early like we tried to do last year, and doing draft versions of it so people can at least start to see it, I think would make a big difference. So I'd actually like to see that bylaw change. I don't know if we'll get to having that conversation at this Maytown meeting, but I would like to see that happen because there's a pretty significant cost savings generated there. Community services. This is the WHEAT money that we give to that organization that does food pantry services more broadly in the Central Mass area, level funding it at $4,000 again, as we did last year and for the last, I believe, 4 or 5 years. So that is a contribution we make. They serve a bit broader population, and I guess what I'm learning is we've always done it. So that's what we do.
So it's like just like a donation almost to the town. It's not like
It's sort
we're
of like
part
a-
of something like an assessment.
It's not an assessment. It's a requested amount, if you will. So not necessarily a donation in the sense of we're giving money to a nonprofit. We're sort of buying into being able to have Berlin residents access that service. It's sort of like an assessment and sort of like a
Yeah.
donation. But I don't think June would like it if we called it a donation, so we won't do that. All right, and then just to combine more accounts to make everybody's life more of a fun headache, I decided that in talking with June, we should have our workers' comp accounts aligned and in the same line item, because it is very confusing to have one workers' comp line item, which is the 912-5200, and then down here you have what's called police and fire sick and accident insurance. That's workers' comp, but for police, which is also known as IOD, or injured on duty. I've always seen them combined into one account, again, just for efficiency and tracking purposes. So my recommendation was to combine the requests for both of those line items. Workers' comp is estimated at a 2% increase for regular workers' comp. Police and fire, injured on duty, was estimated at a 5% increase. So rounding up a couple dollars brings us to $51,000 for those two. Not a significant increase, but being able to combine them into one line item. Don't look at the Worcester Regional yet, because I'm still working on that number. That's a scary number. And then property liability insurance, that is our other insurance that covers everything from professional liability to the buildings to the vehicles. And that they've estimated, we actually locked in with them for FY24 and 25 with Maya. They gave us a 0% increase in 24, and they gave us a 2% increase in 25 if we agreed to lock in for those 2 years with them. So we just had to budget for a 2% increase here, which is a total of $2,021. So not too bad.
That's the straight-up medical insurance, yeah?
No, this is the property casualty insurance for
Whatever it
liability.
is, that's good.
Oh, yeah, no, we don't want to talk
That's good.
about health insurance right now.
I was gonna say, we're probably lucky for 2%.
No, they're estimating 12. They're saying 10 to 12, so you always go with 12. Plus, if you remember last year, we used those extra plans that we had. So Dennis Fairbay had always had an extra family and an extra single plan, with the idea that in any given year somebody could come on that plan. And I think further back he had 2 single plans and 2 family plans budgeted. Because of the huge increase last year, we had 0 extra plans in the FY25 budget. And so we are trying to add back in a couple of those plans in case folks come in, new hires or what have you, or existing employees that decide to get on the health insurance. So it's a little tricky. That's why it looks like a 19% increase right now. But I'm thinking that budget-wise, we're probably going to only be able to budget for 1 single and 1 family plan. It's better than nothing. But I don't think we can sustain a 19% increase in health insurance. It's just too large given everything else. And that's all I had for town administrator budgets.
Good.
I do have a couple other minor changes I wanted to talk to you about, if you guys don't mind. Treasurer and fire, we both sat down after their meetings with you, and we talked about some different things, different options, because one of the things I was trying to figure out with treasurer collector, if you look at this, is there is what looked like a fairly significant increase on the expense side when you look at the actual budget that they had worked up from FY24. And I had him redo it. Let me pull that up. But it turned out there wasn't so much of an increase, which was good for a change. Okay. All right. So what happened with the earlier version of the budget was we did a little bit more, and I don't, that unfortunately I wasn't here when Paul was here, but we looked at this spreadsheet, and it actually looked like the jump was going from 46,000 to 51,603. And so we were trying to figure out what exactly happened when Paul took Dennis's spreadsheet and updated it. And what we realized happened was the 5,500 in additional funding that we had to put in for the deputy collector, that we get back in fees, because they used to collect those fees and keep those fees, and now we're doing it the way that DLS recommended that we do it, had not gotten updated in the FY24 appropriation. So I don't know if he showed you the spreadsheet, but the numbers were off. So we got those numbers corrected here. So it's not as much of an increase. It's only an $847 increase to the expense line item, and everything else looked good. So we were all set there. And then fire is going to be a tough one. And the chief and I met again today to try to talk about strategy, because that's an $85,000 increase, as you saw last year. We went back and looked at the memo from when we did the negotiation like we talked about last time, and we were up to about 60,000 between year 1 and year 2, which I don't know what we're going to be able to do in terms of funding, because what he's budgeting for is assuming all shifts are filled. They have been going woefully understaffed and underfilled, as he mentioned. I mean, some months they've had upwards of 30 or 40 shifts that have gone unfilled. And obviously my concern is, should something happen out in the community, you know, we don't want to have that happen. We ultimately want to fill those shifts, and that's part of the reason that we did the union negotiations the way that we did, so that we can attract and retain folks and fill those shifts, rather than paying $16 an hour overnight, which, you know, nobody wants to work. So we did meet, and we cut back a little bit on some of the expenses, and this is the chief's first budget. So one of the things we talked about was, you know, he's anticipating repairs for things that might break. And I said, well, here we kind of prefer to do the reserve fund transfer process if something actually happens that is unanticipated. So what we did was we kept the $1,277 in the maintenance and repair, but we actually backed out of the 2704. So we level funded the vehicle supplies, because he was anticipating certain things like lights perhaps breaking or things of that nature. Not that they're within their cycle, but things happen. So he said if anything major happened that would cause that amount of increase, he wanted me to just convey that that would probably come forward for a reserve fund transfer, but rather than absorb it in the budget and have it continue year after year, from what I understand, we prefer to do it that way, because then if it's in the budget, it can also be spent on other things if it doesn't get used that weren't necessarily budgeted for. So if you're doing, you know, conservative budgeting, it's much better to do reserve fund transfers rather than add funds for potential things to the budget.
Well, so, yeah, as long as you have a line for maintenance, because
Yes.
every one of these departments is going to have to do maintenance. Just a question of.
So we just level funded, so maintenance and repairs, we kept the increase to 22,777, but on the supplies, we level funded it at 24,554. And we talked about some of the professional and technical services, and there were a couple things in there that were sort of, you know, things he was hoping to do, and we were able to back that amount down to 4,800. So we were able to reduce the expenses down a bit, from 8% to 5%. So that helped somewhat when you look at the expense side of the shop. And one of the other things we did is, you'll see now there is a salary line item and a wages line item. I think one of the things the chief had mentioned that he's hoping to do is eventually convert some of the part-time positions to full-time positions. And one of the best ways to do that is to be able to have a wages line item where you're not breaking it out between part-time and full-time, so you're able to actually flow. And I've been talking to June as well about the best way to set this up, and this is what we've come up with so far. to be able to do it this way, and that way you can have a little bit of flexibility. Being a strong chief, obviously he can make those personnel changes, but we had a discussion about coming before the personnel committee and making sure that everybody was on board and understanding of those changes well in advance of them happening. So, and he's done that consistently all along when he's made changes, so I don't anticipate that being something where people are left in the dark at all.
But you're not doing that with the police, you're keeping it separate, full-time, part-time?
Well, I haven't gotten there yet because after I was just working on this today, and then June said, well, what about police? And I went, oh, yeah, maybe we should do that for police too.
June said the same question?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, she did. So you're very astute and on top of that one. So
No, I'm just looking at the page and it's good.
it would make sense to combine that, I think, as well. So that was going to be tomorrow's conversation.
All right.
So you're
I'm in front.
you're ahead of the game. But fire, we happen to have just met today on it, so that's why it's fresh in my mind.
Was there a reason to have them split between part-time and full-time?
You don't have to legally. I think that was just a preference. You can use a stricter budgeting in that way for tracking purposes, but the problem is when you have so much flow between part-timers coming and going, and then you're trying to say, well, if I make this a full-time position, I'm actually paying less in overtime because now I've got a permanent, committed full-time employee, and I'm not paying out overtime to my other full-timers because I've got part-timers that won't fill the shifts. It gives you that flexibility to make personnel changes during the year. There's less ability for police to do that because obviously he doesn't have the same statutory, what's the word?
Authority.
Thank you. As the fire chief does. So that's kind of why we started with fire. But I think June and I will continue to have the conversations on the police side.
So the wages category under fire and EMS refers to everyone except the chief,
Correct.
and they have contracts. Yes? No?
Some. So the
Okay.
union, to be in the union, you either are a full-timer,
Okay.
obviously, of which there are 3,
Okay.
not counting the chief, obviously, he's
Right.
not in it, or a per diem employee, of which there are 3 or 4, I can't remember the number right now. But you basically have to, per diem is different than call. Call firefighters are not in the union.
Okay.
So they are subject to the personnel bylaw and the personnel policy as opposed to the union contract. So you actually have a limited number of people in the fire union, and it's relatively new.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I just was trying to get my brain around it.
Yep.
But if the idea is going forward, more of the fire department employees will be in the union?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and if you look at now, also when you combine the wages, it looks a little less crazy in terms of the increase. It is a 12% increase, but you do have to split that over 2 years because we went this year without, having all of those shifts filled. Granted, the contract took effect July 1, but it takes some time to bring new people on board and for the word to get around that, hey, Berlin takes care of its people and pays a decent salary. So we're hoping that we can get full staffing or close to it starting July 1. But one of the conversations the chief and I had was that's still a $67,000 increase. That is huge. We estimated 40 plus 15, so we're a little bit higher than that. I was closer to 55, and this is a little bit more. We may have to scale it back a little bit and do a phased in approach to filling some of those vacant shifts. I don't like it. It makes me a little uneasy to have vacant shifts, but we can't have everything we want all at once. So we have to also look at that, a reasonable approach to it too.
I suspect the community doesn't want vacant shifts, especially if they need them at the time when it's a vacant shift.
Well, and you were there, Julie, when we went down the night from Capitol, and the chief was the only one on and had to go on a call.
Yeah.
So that was on a Thursday night. There was nobody who picked up the
Yeah,
shift.
that's really unacceptable.
It's certainly not the way you want to run a department in terms of call times, response times. The fire that happened during the storm, literally they had extra staff on that night because of the storm. Otherwise, that house wouldn't have made it. The chief said another minute or two later, and the house would have been gone. So when you look at the ability to respond, having people in the station, as opposed to just call or, hey, the chief's going to come and do it. It's a different response time, and it's a different outcome. So, but it's a big pill to swallow. And he knows that, and we've had that conversation about can we phase that in somehow, because it's just a lot. So I've had those conversations, so I wanted to share that with you, and that's pretty much all I had for you tonight.
Thank you.
I think of that as
That's a lot of information.
I think
know.
of that as a growing pain.
It is a growing pain. It's a big growing pain.
In different departments and different places in the community have at different times had those years when they're experiencing a growing pain. And I think, if every department had it simultaneously, that would be catastrophic.
Right.
But, yeah.
The problem that I see a couple problems. So there's that growing pain. And I haven't finished the TA recommendations yet, but I have all the department requests entered. One of the things that I neglected to mention when we talked about the town administrator expenses was the supplemental budget request. And there are two, one of which is $30,000 and one of is $550. Let's start with the small one first. $550 is for an Adobe license for D, just like I got last year, so that we can process documents, electronic documents, uploads, signatures, all of that. We don't have Adobe. You can actually purchase it for cheaper than you can to have an annual ongoing subscription, so this would be a one-time purchase permanent license.
Oh, that's good to know, because I have it.
You can buy it from Amazon. You buy it one time for, it's I think $548. And they don't update Adobe all that often, so it's not one that, in my view, you need to have an annual subscription like you do for Word or Excel.
Yeah.
So just food for thought. And then you have it with you forever.
It's portable.
Correct. The $30,000, and let me bring that up. Another one that June and I talked a lot about. We have unanticipated expenses that come up throughout the year, but they come up every year. And those expenses are vacation payouts when we have employees that leave, onboarding of new employees, which includes advertising, physicals. 9 times out of 10 they have to, well, I'm not even going to say that, 10 times out of 10 they have to be paid more than the person who left. In most cases. There are a few exceptions if you bring somebody on who has less experience. And then we have contractual obligations that will be coming up as part of union negotiations with the police department. So the idea was, rather than scramble like we're doing now with the fire department, was to try to put some aside, and rather than do what we're going to be doing shortly, which is a reserve fund transfer for some vacation payout, and looking at some new hire and shifting, like we talked about, bringing on Maura's cleaning so that we could bring on a half-time additional position over in highway. This is a fund that could cover those types of things during the year to not deplete not only the reserve fund, but not deplete the department budget early, and then leave us in the situation we were last year. We were down to, I think, like, what, $7,000 or something in the reserve fund when we went to town meeting. It was small. If you had, the discretionary is probably not the best word, but that was where I could come up with it, and the description is this: the vacation, the new hires, and contractual negotiations. It's something where I could provide regular reports to the FinCom as well as the Select Board on what those costs are used for. And if they're not used, they go back to free cash. So it's not like they can be used for just anything. It would be specifically for those purposes which are listed here and reported on. So
These are really discretionary HR personnel expenses.
pretty much. And we don't have an HR budget other than Personnel Committee gets $250 to join the MMHR, which is the Mass Municipal HR Association.
They're so greedy, I can't believe it, I can't believe
But
it.
is it really discretionary? Because when someone leaves and you have to cover a vacation payout, that's not discretionary.
It's not, we just don't know how much it's
You
gonna be.
just have to pay it.
Correct. The
So-
problem is we don't know how much it's gonna be and we don't know when it's gonna happen.
So you're thinking like the way legal fees work. You know you're gonna have legal expenses every year.
Right.
You just
But you
how
don't know
much.
now what you're gonna have next September for a legal expense.
Right.
So what you need is basically what you were saying, it's an HR. It sounds
It's
like
a
what you
better way
actually,
to
what you
phrase
actually
it,
need
yeah.
is basically HR expenses.
I think it would fly better to people trying to understand what you're doing.
And is this something that you would just sign off yourself, or would it have to go through the select board?
I am open to suggestions on it. It's a new idea. It was actually June who recommended it and brought it to my attention, and I thought about it and I went, my biggest fear is someone looking at it thinking it's a slush fund. That was my initial reaction because that's not what I want.
Coffee and cupcakes and. you
Nah,
know,
no food for you, I'm sorry.
Occasional run down to the casino, you know.
So maybe what we did was much like a reserve fund transfer, maybe we have the FinCom sign off on it. I don't know.
Why
I'm
not?
open to suggestions.
I think this is something I'd like to see in the budget because
Mhm.
it is an annual ongoing expense, right?
Yeah.
We know to operate, you're gonna have to do it. The only way to come up with that number is to look backwards and see what have you
Mhm.
done in other years and what belongs in this particular pot.
Right. And that's where we're at when we look at vacation payouts as well as cost of bringing on new hires, as well as setting aside something toward union negotiations.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a shot in the dark because again,
Mhm.
we may not use it, we may need more than that depending on what goes on in a certain year. So the hope is that we won't have to touch it. But I mean, I've had this past year, three retirements, and a longtime employee leave. So that's 4 vacation payouts that we did this past year.
Mhm.
So, I mean calendar year, but
Mhm.
I don't anticipate hopefully that level of change again, but you just never know. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, as I always have to say, people don't stay in jobs as long as they used to.
Mhm.
It's just the reality.
I think it makes sense. I think having a 7-second signatory is a good idea.
Sure.
It gives it more, what's the word? I can't-
Transparency.
Credence.
Transparency, thank you.
Transparency, that's
Yeah.
good. Yeah, and I'm certainly open to that. Like I said, it makes me a little anxious because I don't want people to think that it's a slush fund or just there for whatever expenses. That's why I tried to narrowly define it to,
Mhm.
which now you've put a label on it, which is HR, but that's exactly what it is. So,
Mhm.
so that's there, which isn't in the budget right now. We also have a supplemental request from the town accountant for some Vadar software that would help allow them to upload documents, and she'll talk a little bit more about that when she comes and gives her presentation. But it would help with preservation of documents electronically so that we don't have to keep boxes and boxes of stuff around. We also have, this is wrong, which is good because I just found this out. We are looking at the possibility of going to electronic ballots, which I know is a potentially contentious issue. We've been comparing the costs from 2 different companies that gave demonstrations. The upfront cost from the company that seemed to be the preferred one is low. It's just under $7,000 for the initial purchase of the machine, delivery, training, the first-year warranty, all of that. And the cost that's annual is only $300 for the warranty on the software and the hardware. where you get kind of whacked is there's a cost for the ballots and there's a cost for setting up the machine for each election. And that amounts to just under $1,400. So we would need an additional $1,700 added to the elections budget annually to support that machine should we decide to go through with it. And one of the things I want to talk to the select board about is if we could use ARPA money to purchase the machine, because it also has to be here 90 days before an election. We miss that by about 3 days if we wait till town meeting to put an article on to actually buy the machine. So it's a little bit of a challenge. So what I would actually recommend is that that initial year be covered by, the first year be covered by ARPA, that first 1,700. So we might be able to put that off till FY26 because you're in a bit of a conundrum if you buy it and then town meeting doesn't vote to pay for the cost to actually do the voting itself, the ballots and everything. But, you know, as much as I would like to bring this to town meeting, time is of the essence. We have the ARPA funding. I'm concerned about the impact that it takes on volunteers who can spend 22 to 24 hours straight doing this. And I just don't feel that that's right. So if it's something we can do, and we'll have more conversations with the select board about it, but that's about what the annual additional cost would be.
And just for clarity, Kristen, I'm understanding, I have spoken to Eloise James, but I'm understanding this is fundamentally a scanning function. We continue with paper ballots, and the 90 days already precludes the primary, because that's fewer than 90 days out, so it would be
It would be for the fall.
for the fall elections, right? And we couldn't do it for town elections either, I don't think.
No.
I think we're still.
It would be for the primaries in the fall would be the first.
But just to clarify, that's what we're talking about in terms of, and because we have one precinct and number of voters, we have one machine, yeah?
Correct. And we actually asked, do we need a backup? One company.
I was at the plant.
Oh, you were? I was going to say,
I was there.
you guys
I
were
was there.
One company was more than happy to sell a backup. The other company said, we service so many cities and towns in Mass that we have somebody within an hour drive of every city and town in Mass on election days. So she's like, I don't know why you need another machine. And we have tech support. You can call, you can troubleshoot.
Well, this is the beauty of maintaining the paper ballot part of the process, is that if your machine goes
Correct.
completely kaput, you're.
The voting continues,
has a-
it's just
voting
the
continues,
scanning
and you
is
can
just.
yeah, because the scanning is really just for
Right, it just
tally.
goes onto a different section in the machine.
Correct.
And then
And
when
it's
the
still
machine's
safe.
up,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. So the initial upfront really isn't as bad as, you know, like the voting devices are a lot more expensive as an initial investment, but that's already been made. The actual ballot electronic devices is not as costly as I would have thought.
Sorry, voting devices for town meeting?
Yes, those, those.
The clickers, the town
The
meeting
clickers, yeah. I mean, I bought them in Leicester, they were 25 grand. I don't know how much they were here, because we have more people there, but I imagine they were probably upwards of 15 or 20.
No, I don't remember. I was here for that, but I don't remember.
I don't remember.
Well, first of all, wasn't there something because of COVID related? Wasn't there?
Well, that's what
Oh,
prompted
maybe
it.
there's some
got it in the
COVID
first
time.
place.
Did you use CARES money, maybe?
I'm not. I know there
Might
was. Yeah, it was not
Okay.
through the regular budget.
That's very helpful. That makes sense. Yeah, we did like a special article at town meeting for it, and yeah, it was almost $25,000. I know those are a lot more expensive. So this is a small cost to help offset the volunteer labor that, you know, we want to keep our volunteers, and there's help, and there's still roles for volunteers and checking people in and in other aspects of the process. But then nobody has to stay for literally a day counting ballots until the wee hours of the morning.
I was just trying to clear it. You said the 90 days, the timing of this. So first of all, you need to physically have the machine.
Yep, because you have
It's
to
not purchased.
notify the state at least 90 days before that you will be using it in the election, which if you wait until town meeting, you miss that deadline. And you couldn't notify them and then just, because you don't know.
Town meeting's like right at the beginning of May, so you have May, June, July. Oh, you don't know exactly how quickly you get the machine, and the next closest election after town meeting is the state primaries.
Yep.
Which are like, what, September?
September. And I don't know the exact deadline. Eloise had just said it was a 90-day deadline, and we wouldn't be able to make it for the first primary in the fall if we waited until town
You probably wouldn't
meeting.
get the machine, I mean, you would need to have the machine physically.
There's like a
handed within, like-
registration process that has to happen with the state. I don't know if they have to come out and inspect it. Do you remember
Okay.
what? Yeah, I don't remember that.
But you
part.
couldn't get the machine in hand and within because you'd have about 30 days to get it in hand after it was approved at town
Yeah,
meeting, right?
Right.
Okay,
The state primary is the day after Labor Day, so maybe September 3, something like that. It's early.
right. So, but I mean, it's like town meeting, I forget exactly, it's really early.
It is. It's the
this
first week
year.
of May.
Yeah.
Because you have May, June, July, August, so that's about 120 days.
You're right. So there's a
From
there's
time
a
you approve
nuance
it,
in here
but
that
you have
we're
those
missing.
30, yeah.
Yeah, I can talk to Eloise.
Like you said, you have
and
to
find out.
physically have it in hand, and then you have a 30-day window essentially to do that.
That's what I believe, because I recall her saying there was some type of registration process that had to happen with the state.
Maybe the registration process has to be 90 days before.
Well, I think they have to check out the machine to make sure that it's all
Well, kosher and working well.
legit and on the up and up. Exactly.
But you
used
would
to
want
be-
them to do that, actually.
But you still have-
100%.
But you're saying you still have a paper ballot?
Yes,
Goes
you still have a
through.
The
paper
machine has a
ballot.
spot, like Peg said, that you can put the paper
In-
ballots in until such time when you
You're
can
probably
scan
not
them
old
if it
enough
goes
to
down.
remember the
little Iowa
multiple
tests.
tests you took in school and they were on Scanmatic.
Oh, I did,
That's what
I
it
did all
is.
Mhm.
Yep.
You're filling in bubbles.
Filling in bubbles.
Okay, but that's good too, because it means you still have a paper
Sure,
backup to
sure.
any, if
Yep.
anybody had a qualm about anything
Well,
like
They
yeah,
have
the
the
ballots
physical
are
ballot.
still paper.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you have to fill them out with the little bubbles, and then you put them in.
And there's a tape that comes out too that tells you how many were inserted, how many needed to be hand counted, so everything's gotta add up at the end. So there's still some manual labor in it, but you're not,
Mhm.
if there's 15 things on the ballot, you count one, and then you recount two,
Mhm.
so.
And Peg will tell you it's difficult to jam it up,
Oh, we tried.
Try, yeah.
We
but it will
tried.
tell you if you jam it. But I mean, you can put it in upside down, backwards, flipped.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter how you put it in the machine. It'll read it, which is good.
And then there's protocol. If it doesn't read it, then you can either say, run it through, I don't care, or you physically take the ballot back to the warden and they go and destroy it and hand you a new one.
Mhm.
So there's protocols and security and lock keys and encrypted thumb drives, so.
It's offline, right?
It's a very
The
secure
machine?
process.
I think so, yeah.
Sure seems to be.
No, is it? It has to be.
It ought to be.
Yeah.
It's used by many, I forget exactly how many cities and towns she
Yeah.
said they had in Mass, but it was
Mhm.
in the 200s, I believe.
Yeah.
It's a very secure process. The state wouldn't allow it
Mhm.
otherwise.
Yeah, the paper gives you the capability for audit and recount, otherwise,
Mhm.
Yeah.
the direct recorded electronic machines from the early,
Well, when I
Early
first
aughts.
voted, I used the tabs, the metal tab system.
me too, New York.
In
New York?
in Pennsylvania,
No, Pennsylvania, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, where the big
I've only
lever
ever,
close
Yeah,
the curtain and.
yeah,
I've only
and
ever
you're doing
voted
it.
on a paper ballot.
And then when I
But I've lived in
moved
small towns of my own.
moved to Somerville and Arlington, it was all the,
Scan.
yeah. But you had to it was like taking the SAT again.
I think,
Mhm.
You
I
had
think
to
the
use a
plan
special
sounds
marker and
like
fill
a good one.
everything in
Get
correctly,
the
or
machine
read your.
in
And
the
there
house.
is a
I think
counter
you
on
really
it, because you
should.
know how everyone
Yeah.
stands there and you want to see
Well,
the
also
number when
the-
they
And
go,
cover the first
"Cha-ching."
year
Well, the spring
costs.
primary or the
It will
fall.
still come up
the
and say
primary
your
in the fall,
ballot number
unless
7,
unless there's something I'm missing
12,
within
so
the
you
state
can
of
still
that.
walk out.
It's probably going to be a pretty low turnout because of what's going to be relevant of anything. I don't know of anything even in the state that's going to be too.
No, because everyone's newly elected.
So, exactly. So it'd be, I mean, a good training ground of having it there as opposed to being, the actual election in November when.
And that's
it's
what Eloise
likely
said.
to
She
be-
wouldn't roll it out at the presidential.
Yeah.
like-
Exactly. That's what you want, is something new with something with high volume like that.
Mhm.
So if you
Uh,
don't do it now, then you're looking to like the fall of FY '25.
Oh, no.
So we need some funding approval to do this purchase, is that coming?
So I plan to talk to the select board about possibly using some ARPA funding to
Oh,
do
right,
it.
right, you said that.
Mhm.
But would we fund it some other way out of the fiscal '24 budget?
So
Select
this-
board says no.
The 1,700 is what it would cost, because you have to, according to Eloise, the state pays for their elections, but the town would have to pay those fees for the annual election that we have in town. So the 1,700 would be for the May 25 annual town election that we would have to
Okay.
pay. So, I would almost recommend that first year not be paid out of the budget. I put it in because it is a supplemental funding request that you'd have to eventually up it.
Yeah.
But I would recommend paying the first year out of ARPA and then putting that 1,700 into 26, I think is probably the best way to do it. Because like I said, if you get one approved but not the other, then you have a problem. Unless you do a reserve fund transfer, which we're back to that again, so.
I think that makes sense.
And then, the police had a half-year position they were asking for. That was the other big one. And Fred's coming, and we're meeting next week, but he did not put in for another full-time highway person, and I'm putting in for one for him because I think that it's an urgent need. We're
so,
going
too.
to have a conversation.
Yeah, I drove around town this week, so I think we do need it. Yep. That wasn't a complaint, it's just an observation.
Yep.
You do monitoring the highway clearance?
No, I was just trying to get somewhere.
We're asking too few
Just trying to
people
get
to do
somewhere.
too
Come
many
on.
things,
Yeah.
and we're going to lose
Yeah.
good people.
I just lost my mailbox.
Ah,
I was asked if I
Probably
wanted to
put it
drive
in
the
the
plow
way.
truck yesterday, and I said, if you'd like to lose a lot of
It's behind
mailboxes
a
in town, I'd be
telephone
happy to
pole.
do so.
How do you manage to take out the mailbox, which is behind a telephone pole, and not take the pole? I
Oh,
do
that
not
one.
know.
I wonder if there's
That would be
extra
me.
points for doing that.
Maybe it's a
Certain
competition.
residents-
It's like Paperboy. Remember the old game
Uh-huh.
Paperboy? If you hit certain things with the newspaper, you got extra points.
yeah.
Well, I think sounds like the bar is pretty low to, if you do the snow plowing, that you don't have to worry about.
I can't drive a pickup truck, so that would just be a bad move altogether.
I would love to see you behind a snowplow.
It was really funny because Fred and I had that conversation
comes the
yesterday. I
town
said, if there's
administrator.
anything
Look
I
at
can
him."
do, and he goes, you want to get behind a truck? And I said, you don't want me behind a truck. I would do it, but you won't be happy.
I love that idea.
So the thing you missed, you should have put a really big sign out by your mailbox saying, I
Hit
serve on the finance committee.
Yeah, that look at your bar.
No, they don't know that, they need to know it.
Yeah, we can find out who plows your road.
There you go. They have roots.
Okay, so any more on budget stuff?
No, I think
Um,
that's
and
good
we're-
for tonight. We're going to talk, I think, next time. I told June to take the night off. We'll talk next time about some reserve fund transfers.
Okay, and the only other thing is just scheduling for what's going on with the schools. Have you heard anything
Yes.
back on that yet?
I have not.
Okay.
So,
All right, no new information?
So I was going to ask you with the, for the people we still need to see,
yes.
are they getting back to you on the nights they can come?
So the issue we ran into was with boards and committees because we said if needed, and so some of them didn't plan on it, even though they were listed. So we have them coming on February 21st. That will be Conservation, Recreation, and CPA.
Okay.
The other ones were all level funded under $1,500, or less.
Okay.
And we didn't have them come last year, so I figured we didn't need them to.
Okay.
And what I'll do is I've got the times, and if we can just do internal times, I'll email everybody. Because the problem is if we put times on MyTownGov, then somebody's late or whatever, we can't.
Well, I'm not sure who
Start.
that came from. I didn't start that, but somebody had mentioned they wanted to know,
Eloise mentioned it to
that they
me.
wanted to know when a budget was being presented so they knew when to be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
If they didn't want to be here for the whole thing. I actually went back and looked, and I'm going, it's like, because I know I would tell people when they came in, because I didn't want to have to be, because usually we met 3 committees at a time, and last thing you want to do is somebody there at 7:30, and you don't get around to them till 8:30, when you could just, stagger them up. And I look back, I never put in times. I just said, these were the boards we were
Yeah.
meeting with on that, and I think no times need to be on there. We'll give times to the, to who is coming in, so that they can, better
They have
manage
their
their
little
time.
ticket for what order they're in.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, so that you don't want somebody that, rearrange their schedule to be here at 7:30 and then sticks around,
And have
doesn't
to
get
sit
on
and
until
wait
8:30,
till
right?
or 9,
When
yeah.
it could have been like, well, I didn't have to reschedule anything. I could have easily been here at 8:30.
Right,
So-
which I totally get, and
Yeah.
that way if I give everyone 20-minute
Mm-hmm.
blocks, but we're not making it like official, then if somebody's finishes early, I can go in and talk about general budget stuff, or,
Mm-hmm.
we can move somebody up, or if
Yeah.
somebody doesn't show, it just gives us a little bit more flexibility than holding us to
Well,
a
in the
specific
past,
time.
when we did have times for anything, we did do general business that wasn't timed until we got to the next timed
Yeah.
item.
Oh, that's
So,
true.
But either way, we don't need the times in there.
Yeah.
I will give everybody a time though, so they know, and we'll do
Yeah.
it in the 20-minute increments, like you said, because we do have a couple big ones coming up where
Yeah.
one night I think we have 4. They're smaller departments, but we have,
Yeah.
at least an hour, for the first hour, the last folks don't need to be here, so.
Yeah, and all those other small committees, I mean, the whole point of having just mentioned is we always wanted to make sure that they knew about it, and they weren't a case of, we don't want anybody going out there and saying, it's like finance committee wouldn't talk to us. No, you have your opportunity. If there's something you wanted to talk to us, we didn't see a reason to, but
Right.
you had your opportunity. That's all we wanted to do.
Absolutely. And
'cause
the
I did-
Agricultural Commission, by the way, wanted to come in, and James frantically wrote me that he was stuck on a plane trying to get back from Japan today. And he's like, I don't know what to do. Should I send somebody else? But I don't know if anyone else can come. I said, it's okay. Don't worry. So I just wanted to put a plug out there that the AgCom did want to come. They were level funded at $1,500 from last year.
Well, I think we should have them come
Okay.
some
Yeah.
other time.
We can do
Yes,
that.
exactly.
When-
If they want to come, and
Yeah.
that's what we want, is they have the opportunity.
Yep.
I
I
think
will
it-
make
it
sure
also
to reach
gives-
back out.
I think it also gives these people a chance to explain what they're doing with the money.
I think,
And what they're doing in the community too.
Yeah, no, no.
I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Because I've noticed that
Yeah.
like both police and fire, they hung around.
Yeah.
It was like, it was really interesting, and I got to hear things that I did not know.
I thanked them
Yeah.
both actually. I thought I was really appreciative that they hung around.
They were
and-
good together. Yeah, it was
Mhm.
good.
Yeah, they were.
Well, there's obviously collaboration that has to go on there, so knowing what's going on and each issues and that stuff.
But that was one of the
things.
things that came out after Capitol,
Yep.
when we went and did the tour of the police, fire station, and the building as a whole. It was both the fire chief and the police chief explaining how they're trying to work to be more collaborative between the departments, and getting people working together, and what all the pain points are, and how it's not, the building isn't really structured for collaboration. But they're working despite that physical limitation.
Correct. And that extends up here as well, which has been wonderful. I have to say I've worked in places where police and fire were all but a closed shop. And unless there was some emergency, and usually it was at crisis level before you got involved. And I just can't say enough about the great communication that we all have. And being in the same building and just being able to say, hey, can I come up for a minute and talk to you about something is
Yeah.
so helpful to building that.
Yeah, physical
Rapport and-
space makes all the difference in the
does.
world.
It really does.
Yeah, it really does. Like if you've got a public safety complex that's just fire and it's on this street, and then you have the police on
Yeah.
another street, and then the town offices on yet another street,
Yep.
that makes communication much more difficult. Whether people, even if people desire to communicate, that physical difference really makes it difficult.
It does.
There are no casual moments. All the conversation is structured and formalized.
Yeah, and you have to make an appointment, and then you drive over there, and it's so different.
Yep.
We moved the school administration into the 3rd floor of the town hall in Leicester, and they were right across the hall from the town administrator's office, and I can't even tell you, it was like immediately we were brainstorming about all kinds of different things, and conversations that had never happened before.
Yeah.
So it was great.
Boylston has a benefit in that
Yeah.
regard.
Um,
And by the way,
Who's
on-
next week?
Next week is
Because I can't remember.
Highway. Oh shoot, this isn't the one I think this is it. Hold on. I'll go in this way. Give you just a second, I'll pull it up. Unfortunately, when I unplug from the physical network, I have to go in a special way.
Well, we have inspection services, highway, and
thank
Board
you.
of Health.
Inspection services and what? I'm sorry.
And highway and Board of Health.
Board of Health.
I meant to tell you, I moved Board of Health. Sorry.
That's okay.
What I did was, we had we had 5 on January 31st. So I asked if accounting could come on next Wednesday. So it's gonna be inspectional services, highway, and accounting.
Okay.
And June was good with that. And then I moved Board of Health to the 21st with recreation,
Conservation, CPA.
CPA. And no, conservation actually can't come that night because their meetings are the 1st and 3rd. It's like the logistics are, feel like I'm like a travel planner. They can come on the 31st, which is why I moved everything around. And I will send you out a new schedule.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Scott?
You didn't put that in the budget?
I didn't. I just finished it this afternoon. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Oh, no, that's okay. 'cause
I ended up with
sometimes-
5 people on one night on the 31st, and I went, this isn't working, so I had to reshuffle everybody. I don't
Yeah.
want people here till 10 o'clock.
No,
at
sometimes
night.
Google is a little slow in
Yeah.
updating, so I was
No
just
problem.
checking.
I will throw it in there.
The one thing that came in on the school, Scott, was, I think it was January 10, the note from Superintendent Costello that we're gonna need more time to properly put together the budget, so.
Yes.
Because it was, I think in response to our formal letter, we said, get it to us early, and she formally responded. It was a nice note, there wasn't a
Yes.
lot in there that you could
Yeah.
object to. But,
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting is, last year, even when we ended the year, let's start together, talking about things early and stuff like that. Then they go off to the state or do whatever their thing, they get a recommendation, go and don't really reveal too much. Leave it till later. So, yeah, I think it's contradictory to making things very collaborative, but there's nothing I think we can do about it. Especially when you're getting, what was it, the group that they met with? Was it the state or
Mars.
Mars.
Mars?
Not the planet. Mass
Mass.
Association of Regional School Boards. Right? Did I get it right?
Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools.
Schools, excuse me,
Yeah.
not schools.
So, Scott, I
Because
think-
regional schools have different governance, funding, that,
It's structured differently.
people who work in the schools in Lexington or single town school systems, it's a whole different ballgame.
Mhm.
It is, and I'm used to having a school department where they're given a number like every other department. So it's I can tell you, it's a whole different world.
Yeah, regional schools don't do that.
Nah.
Yeah.
They get to do their own budget, and then we get to
Yeah.
decide how we meet.
Well-
I think, Scott, what she's trying to tell us is there's kind of a normal way that things are done, and that's what they were talking about. That's why why they met with the Mars people, to try
Correct.
to figure out how do other regional districts do this, what's the right way to do it.
Educational process.
Educational process, which is good for educators, so.
And it was in response to me reaching out, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
Go
you,
ahead,
to
no.
the fact that we didn't have a level services budget, which, yeah.
And I raised that, I didn't actually make it to that subcommittee meeting of the school committee, but I raised that, request again. If I were in there in person, I'd be asking you, could you give us, because all we're seeing is the increases we want.
Right.
And not a look at what would it look like if it were level. And
And that's what Carol said was part of this new Mars process,
was to
so.
not look at a level?
was, this is the stages that you go through, she had said.
Yeah.
So
Oh, so you go through the things you want first, and then you go then you
whittle
go
it
and do the
down, it
level?
sounds like.
And whittle it down.
Which I
okay.
think Boylston kind of does with their FinCom. Like you submit everything you want under the sun, and then the FinCom
Oh.
kind of helps whittle it down, which I think we used to do
Well, that's
here.
the way a lot of things were done, yes, before, or at least that was my experience.
My
with things.
understanding is that by the time we hit COVID and all the uncertainties,
Yeah.
is kind of how we got to this, what do we need to do the same thing next year that we did this year? And then what's all the additional requests? To
Right.
make sure that we were staying on track with our current service needs. And then still having a way of adding to that.
Are you talking?
Yeah.
Sorry, you're talking about the town budget overall.
The town
Yeah.
budget overall,
I think
yeah.
a big piece
Okay.
is the town administrator. By coincidence, we just had town administrator started 6
Mhm.
months before COVID hit. So I
Yeah.
think it was much more to do with the fact we had a town administrator.
But we also
Yeah.
find, I think you also
Yeah.
had something
Welcome
that
to
before
Berlin.
that, before the TA started, you also didn't have, it was like, wasn't it the FinCom doing a lot of
A
these
lot more.
spreadsheets? So you had.
Was that fun back in the
No,
day,
no, it was
Scott?
that special Excel sheet. That was that special thing.
I have
Yeah.
speaking of regional
Oh.
schools, I have a question.
What, that only, was like, only one person?
I know Assabet has a significant increase, and you said it's not under our control because we never know what number of students are going.
We pay a per pupil assessment.
Yes, I
at Assabet,
understand
yeah.
that. So I would think it would be interesting if we're presenting whatever the number was, I can't remember, increase. If that could be expressed as, how many students is that?
I have that information.
Because I
actually.
think that's an important, like, how many more kids are being serviced by Assabet?
Well, that's what a big piece that each year, like last year and even the year before that, we have pointed out is the large, what the number had gone up from. I mean, because percentage-wise, it's a big number, and likewise, a much, a big jump in overall students. So we have emphasized that with each, I know the last two budget
Yeah.
cycles at town meeting and our meetings beforehand.
Yeah, because I think not only the number of students, but has the per pupil costs gone up? Like,
Right.
there are multiple factors going on.
Yep.
And,
We did
There's
do that.
many,
9%.
there's
This
many
year budget will
factors.
be 9% increase.
Yeah.
yeah.
For which one?
Aspet.
Yeah.
So it's 37 students enrolling in the FY estimated assessment, because obviously we're waiting for governor to release her numbers. Estimated assessment is 768. And last year it was somewhere closer to 7, but I can pull that up.
We had a big hit last year because we had proportionally more Berlin students.
Mm.
one question I have
There's
is-
a few things that.
A few things
is-
that-
Right.
one of the-
One was the other one that all the towns got hit by was being phased in was the fact that they're accepting much more kids from the member towns due to changes in the selection criteria. So before that, they were bringing in a bunch of kids from the non-member towns that were paying out-of-district tuition, and the out-of-district tuition was being used to offset our costs. As that decreased, you also, which wasn't just us, I mean, that was across the board
Those are
for
the two
all
big
7 member
things.
towns, right?
two
And then,
things
at the same time, we
Yep.
just happened to have the bad timing of our percentage of students dressed, well,
So Scott,
Yeah.
what's your recall on this? I have some recollection that Assabet, you can't just expand the number of seats because of the nature of the vocational training. So
well, they only have, obviously, whatever the capacity they can handle,
Yeah, they
right?
have-
At their
I think
physical.
they're at capacity, isn't
Yes.
that why they're not?
Well, yes,
bringing
exactly.
in yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that's also like the disadvantage, like at Tohoto, where you have 2 schools that are regionalized, but one is part of Assabet and one is not. So you have a student from Berlin that can sit there and pretty much guaranteed he's going to get into Assabet, and Boylston, which probably has like
yeah.
2x the number, students because of the ratio of the about 1/3, 2/3, and they're very unlikely to get into, even though they could have. They're taking the same class, sitting next to each other, but one was not part of the region and one is. So it's also, a unique situation there.
Right.
a lot of Boylston kids too swap out and go to St. John's. You know, so you lose they're more private, Boylston side, where Berlin seems to be more Assabet public
Assabet.
side, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
It's always
Boylston
been that way.
obviously a little closer to,
Mhm.
but anybody, I mean, my son goes to St. John's, so I mean, it's just
Yeah.
going down the street, I mean, 290, I mean,
Right.
it doesn't get much easier.
If I haven't thanked you for that yet, I will right now. Helping our budget.
Yeah. And my daughter, not St. John's, but.
And they're having an SRO discussion on Monday night at Tohoto.
Yes, that was the other, I wanted to raise that, thank you for bringing it up, yeah.
It's on my
Um,
calendar.
Yes. I don't know who else is.
That's on Monday night?
5 o'clock.
But it starts at 5.
Yeah,
It starts at 5.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
5 to 7.
Unfortunately, we have our VP flying in on Monday, so I'll be in the office, so the chances of
Yeah.
me getting someplace by 5 o'clock from
Particularly,
Burlington
yeah. Getting
are
out of
slim to
Burlington.
none, so it will not be me that will be attending,
Chief
unless something
Shartner.
changes.
Chief Shartner will be there, I know you'll be there, so we can certainly have a further discussion, if need be.
Is Goody gonna go?
I believe so, yeah. It's, Chief Shartner and I have talked a little bit about it, and the challenges go, and I think we talked a little bit here. We have essentially an SRO at BMS, just not with an agreement fully funded under Mass General law. in
Very
the way
specific
that it's
requirements.
Set up, there
Yeah.
are, yes, which you
Yep.
sent me, which were very helpful.
Yep.
But now they're looking at doing an official SRO at
Right.
Boylston Elementary and Tohoto. And because those are both in Boylston, that SRO would need to be a member of the Boylston Police Department. But we'd have to figure out how that cost sharing happens at Tohoto.
Exactly.
And obviously, given, competing costs and everything else, that's, it could present a challenge.
And
It's not cheap.
what does an SRO do when there's no, during the summer and stuff like that? Especially if they're part of the Boylston Police Department, if they aren't doing something with the schools.
I think they work with the police department when they're not, but that's a great question to ask, because they actually have to have a vehicle. They have to have, I believe, an office in the schools, if I'm not mistaken. They have to do specific training. There has to be an MOU signed between the district and the superintendent in the police department. Mary knows. Mary's very versed in it.
So both the school district and the police chief, every year at the end of the year, have to report back to the state all these details. There's
Yeah, I
a lot
remember
of
reading that part
reporting
of it.
that has to go back to the state for each one of these positions. And yes, unless you're going to take the school bus in, you need a police vehicle dedicated to that person, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah. Not one being used for pursuit.
exactly, yeah. I'd love to see a little higher level discussion about what's the goal.
And the efficacy.
Well, yeah, but the bigger one
Because
is the
there's,
goal. What's the
it's
goal?
really hard to substantiate efficacy.
Yes.
It's almost impossible.
Yep.
Well, and could they do some type of arrangement similar to what we have at BMS? Where it's unofficial, but working well from all accounts that I've heard.
But you need to have that officer who's specifically trained in mentoring and all those other items that you just can't take a police officer and go,
No, it's very
Being-
person-centric.
right, be a mentor for a seventh grade to a senior.
True.
You
It's a
got to have
different
somebody who's really
population.
high-end at community policing.
Correct.
And those people exist. So, but, and they, could be trained to do that sort of thing.
Well, there's a number of grants out there, so I'm curious if they're even looking at those.
Well, I sent a flyer over to Kristen and to April Stewart in Boylston. The Central Mass Regional Planning, there was a note attached in the latest newsletter about grant-funded free training for security and the interface between emergency medical, the communications, the police, the fire, the location, whatever, shooter safety, integrated. So, I guess the point at the high level is there are some alternatives. If your goal is safety in the schools, there's some alternative. If you're you know, that's,
If that's the goal.
if that's the goal, right. And the thing that I really noticed when I read the Massachusetts regulations on the school resource officers is that it is a decision that belongs with the district superintendent and the police chief and the town involved. It doesn't belong in the school committee's hands.
That's right.
So the initiative towards an SRO has been fully driven by the school committee here.
Well, so it'll be interesting to see the breakdown, the racial breakdown as well, because all the studies that I've looked at said that if you have a white officer in a higher population of non-white students, it does not go well.
Yeah, and then I know a parent raised the question along the way in the conversation around the school committee and the SRO is raised the question, well, what about student discipline? You know, who wears the hat, right? Who's in charge here? And that's where the memo of understanding between the district and the police chief, that's supposed to spell all that out, but still, you're in the hallway in the moment. What are you doing, right? What's going to actually happen if there's an incident? You could, Cliff, you know more about this stuff than
I know a heck of a lot about it.
Not to mention you even getting, I mean, you already deal with it, the teachers and that's it, but at least a lot of times you have a decent ratio of male to female teachers, but you have one officer, that situation happens in the locker rooms and that stuff. Well, it's a male officer and you got females, or if it's a female teacher, it's like, it opens up more can of worms that I think mostly that they will address, especially with a house of this size.
That's a very interesting
I know. I think it will just, my own personal opinion, but, you know, let's just have more things to fight over and have controversy on, but.
Scott, you just opened up something that I hadn't even thought about, so I thank you again. Thank you for what you do with your kids. For our town budget. That comment.
All right.
Are we done?
Yes, we are done.
Motion to
And
adjourn.
that on the left, yes. Second that.
Okay,
Right.
so at 9:17.
Thank you.